November 20th, 1943, 5:42 a.m. off the coast of Batio Island, Tarawa Atoll. The ocean is black glass under a bruised sky. Engines idle low, coughing diesel into the salt air. Inside a cramped plywood boat, 21 U.S. Marines stand shoulder to shoulder, rifles clutched tight, helmets knocking together as the hull rocks in the swell. Someone mutters a prayer. Someone else checks the bolt on his M1 Garand for the third time. Ahead, the horizon flashes. Battleship guns from USS Colorado and USS Maryland rip open the dawn. The concussion rolls across the lagoon like a physical thing. Batio, 3 miles long, half a mile wide, disappears beneath pillars of sand and smoke. Coconut palms snap like matchsticks. Concrete bunkers vanish in dust. For a moment, it looks like nothing could survive that. Then the coxswain guns the engine. The boat lurches forward, its flat bow slapping the water. Spray hits the Marines in the face. The smell of cordite mixes with diesel and fear. This craft, just 36 feet long, built of plywood over a steel frame, was once dismissed as a swamp boat, a toy, something unfit for serious naval warfare. Now it is carrying the first wave into hell. Behind them, the lagoon churns with dozens, then hundreds of identical silhouettes. Low profiles, boxy bows, ramps wired shut, Higgins boats, LCVPs, landing craft vehicle personnel. They race toward a thin white line of surf. And then the lagoon betrays them. The tide is wrong. The naval planners had expected a high tide to float the landing craft over the coral reef that guards Batio like a jagged moat. But the water is shallow, barely 3 feet in places. Larger, steel-hulled LCVs grind to a halt, their propellers chewing uselessly at coral. Japanese machine guns open up. From concealed bunkers of reinforced coconut logs and concrete, Type 92 heavy machine guns rake the stalled boats. Tracers stitch the water. Mortar rounds splash among the formations. The illusion of a destroyed defense evaporates. Colonel Keiji Shibasaki's garrison, nearly 4,500 men, has survived the bombardment. Inside the Higgins boat, bullets slap the water like thrown gravel. But the boat keeps moving. Its shallow draft, barely 3 feet, lets it skim where heavier craft cannot. The flat bottom scrapes coral, shudders, pushes on. The coxswain swears and guns the throttle again. The Marines feel the hull grind beneath their boots. They are going to make it. You can almost hear Andrew Higgins' voice in that moment, gravelly, defiant, New Orleans drawl, telling the Navy brass who once scoffed at his plywood contraptions that shallow water was exactly the point. 50 yards from shore, the ramp drops. Daylight floods in. Machine gun fire punches through the open front. The first Marine in line disappears before his boots even touch sand. The second stumbles over him. The third keeps moving. There is no room to hesitate, no space for fear. They pour out into waist-deep water, rifles held overhead, packs dragging them down. The coral cuts through boots. Blood mixes with surf. The beach ahead is narrow, no more than a few dozen yards before a seawall of blasted debris and barbed wire. Behind them, more Higgins boats arrive. Some strike mines, some burn, but many reach the reef nose forward, ramp down, again and again. By 9:00 a.m., the lagoon is a graveyard of wreckage, steel hulls stranded on coral, bodies drifting in the tide. Yet the plywood boats keep coming, weaving between obstacles, delivering wave after wave. The Marines cling to a strip of sand barely wide enough to lie down on. Japanese fire pins them flat. Radios fail. Units mix together. Casualties mount in terrifying numbers. But they are ashore. And without those shallow draft boats, they would still be trapped in the lagoon, easy targets, drowning under packs and gunfire. Back in Washington, years earlier, senior naval officers had laughed when Higgins demonstrated his Eureka boat in the Louisiana bayous. A swamp craft, they called it, unfit for open ocean. The Navy preferred traditional landing methods, troops climbing down cargo nets into small boats, exposed and slow. Higgins had insisted on a bow ramp, straight onto the beach, fast in, fast out. They said it would never work against a defended shoreline. Now, on Batillo's blood-soaked sand, that argument is being settled in real time. By nightfall, nearly 5,000 Marines will be dead or wounded. And the only reason any foothold exists at all is because a so-called swamp boat could cross a reef that steel could not. But Tarawa is far from over. As darkness falls, the Japanese still hold the center of the island, and the Marines, isolated, shattered, clinging to fragments of beach, are about to learn just how deep the nightmare goes. New Orleans, Louisiana, 1938. The air smells of oil, river mud, and hot metal. Inside a cluttered workshop along the industrial canal, Andrew Higgins stands with his sleeves rolled high, cigar clenched between his teeth. Sparks fly as a welder fuses steel ribs into the skeleton of a new boat. Higgins watches every inch of it like a man guarding a secret. Outside, the Mississippi moves slow and brown, carrying barges toward the Gulf. Inside, Higgins is fighting the United States Navy. He had built his reputation designing shallow draft boats for trappers and oil companies, craft that could slide over mudflats and skim across Louisiana swamps where ordinary hulls ran aground. The Eureka boat, he called it, flat-bottomed, tunnel-stern, designed to go where others couldn't. The Marine Corps saw potential immediately. In 1938, Major General Holland M. Smith, hard, analytical, already thinking about the next war, understood that America would not fight on open plains. It would fight across oceans. It would need to land men on hostile shores. The Navy was slower to accept that reality. Traditionalists believed in ship-to-shore transfers the old way, sailors lowering cargo nets, soldiers climbing down into small boats, vulnerable and disorganized. It had worked in the past. Why change it? Higgins knew why. Because the next war would not wait politely for men to disembark. He invited naval officers to Louisiana to watch his boat demonstrate its shallow draft agility. The Eureka sliced through marsh channels and grounded itself deliberately on a sandbar, then backed off with ease. But something was missing. The Eureka had no bow ramp. Troops would have to climb over the sides under fire. Higgins hated that. One night, according to company lore, he saw a photograph of a Japanese landing craft with a drop-down bow door. Whether myth or fact, the result was real. Higgins ordered his engineers to cut the bow off one of his prototypes and replace it with a ramp wide enough for men, and even small vehicles, to charge straight out. It was radical, it was ugly. And Navy inspectors were unimpressed. Too flimsy, some muttered, tapping the plywood hull. Won't survive heavy seas. Others questioned whether a ramp would jam under pressure, whether the flat bottom would handle surf. Higgins didn't argue with paperwork, he argued with performance. In 1941, during exercises at New River, North Carolina, Marines tested the new landing craft personnel. The ramp dropped. Men stormed out in seconds. No scrambling over gunwales. No clumsy bottlenecks. Observers took note. When war came after Pearl Harbor, there was no time left for skepticism. The United States needed thousands of landing craft, fast. Higgins Industries exploded almost overnight. His New Orleans plant expanded to 7 factories. Women and black workers, previously excluded from much of the industrial workforce, were hired in unprecedented numbers. Assembly lines ran day and night. Jazz bands played on factory floors to keep morale high. At its peak, Higgins Industries would produce more than 20,000 landing craft. Dwight D. Eisenhower would later say, "Andrew Higgins is the man who won the war for us." Without his boats, there would have been no way to land troops in Europe or the Pacific. But in 1938, that future was invisible. All anyone saw was a stubborn boat builder from Louisiana, insisting that plywood and practicality could outthink steel and tradition. Back on BTO, November 20th, 1943, that stubbornness is keeping men alive. As the sun sets on the first day of fighting, more Higgins boats cross the reef, weaving through wreckage. Some are riddled with bullet holes. Coxswains steer standing upright, exposed, hands locked on throttles. The lagoon glows orange from burning fuel. On the beach, Marines dig shallow foxholes in sand so thin they hit coral within inches. The dead lie where they fell. There is no room to move them. Colonel David Shoup, commanding the 2nd Marine Division's assault forces, radios a blunt assessment back to the fleet. Casualties many, percentage dead not known, combat efficiency, we are winning. Winning? It doesn't look like winning. But more boats are coming in the dark, guided by tracer fire and instinct. They bring ammunition, water, reinforcements. Without them, the Marines would be stranded on a hostile strip of sand with no resupply, no evacuation. The Higgins boat was mocked as flimsy. Now it is the only lifeline. Yet even as it proves itself indispensable, Tarawa is becoming a symbol of something else, something deeply unsettling. If taking a tiny island costs this much blood, what will it cost to reach Japan? And who will have to ride these boats next? November 21st, 1943, Batio Island. Dawn does not bring relief. It brings clarity. As the first gray light spreads across the lagoon, the full cost of yesterday's assault is revealed. Higgins' boats sit frozen on the reef like broken teeth, some burned to skeletons, others riddled with machine gun holes. Bodies drift between them, nudged gently by the tide. On the narrow beach, Marines of the 2nd Division wake where they collapsed, behind seawalls, beneath shattered palm trunks, pressed flat into sand that offers almost no cover. Their uniforms are stiff with salt and blood, the wounded whisper for corpsmen who have already been hit themselves. And inland, Japanese guns are still firing. Colonel Keiji Shibasaki had promised his men that 1,000,000 Americans could not take Tarawa in 100 years. His garrison, elite special naval landing forces and Korean labor troops, had spent months turning Batio into a fortress. Concrete pillboxes, interlocking fields of fire, pre-sighted artillery, every yard of sand mapped and measured. The naval bombardment had been thunderous. It had not been enough. The Marines now face a brutal reality. They must cross open ground against fortified positions with almost no heavy armor support. Many of the amphibious tractors, LVTs, that managed to crawl over the reef are destroyed or disabled. Tanks that attempted to land were knocked out or swamped. And still, the Higgins boats keep coming. Wave after wave pushes toward the reef. Some boats unload men directly onto coral, forcing them to wade hundreds of yards under fire. Packs grow heavier with every step. Rifles are held high. A stumble can mean drowning. You can almost feel the weight of it, the pack dragging you down, the water filling your boots, the crack of bullets snapping past your ears. Coxswain steer straight into chaos. Seaman First Class William Bordelon, a coxswain from San Antonio, maneuvers his Higgins boat back and forth across the reef multiple times, delivering Marines despite intense fire. His boat is hit again and again. Eventually, Bordelon himself is mortally wounded, but not before bringing critical reinforcements ashore. These boats are not armored, not heavily armed. They are plywood and courage. Yet they are everywhere. On the second day, Marines begin pushing inland in desperate, fragmented assaults. Flamethrowers belch fire into bunker apertures. Satchel charges are shoved against concrete embrasures. Browning automatic rifles chatter from behind shattered palm stumps. The fighting is intimate, savage, yard by yard. And every few hours, another Higgins boat noses toward the reef carrying ammunition crates, water cans, radio batteries. Without that constant flow, the line would collapse. The wounded would have no evacuation. The assault would stall entirely. Major General Julian C. Smith, commanding the 2nd Marine Division, understands the stakes. There is no turning back. The fleet cannot remain exposed indefinitely. The island must be secured quickly. But quick is no longer possible. By November 22nd, the Marines are advancing through the center of Batio. Japanese resistance stiffens around command bunkers. Night falls again, bringing infiltration attempts and sudden bursts of close-quarters violence. Flares turn the sky ghostly white. Shadows move where shadows should not. Through it all, the Higgins boats remain in motion. They are scarred now, blackened. Many have makeshift patches hammered over bullet holes. Crews are exhausted, hands blistered from throttles, ears ringing from near-miss explosions. Yet the design holds. The shallow draft, the bow ramp, the ability to beach, unload in seconds and reverse away. What was once dismissed as fragile proves adaptable, replaceable, mass-producible. And that may be the most important part. Because Tarawa is not just a battle. It is a rehearsal. Admiral Chester W. Nimitz watches reports arrive aboard his flagship. Casualty numbers climb. Over 1,000 Marines dead within 76 hours. Public reaction back home will be fierce when photographs are released. Americans will see, perhaps for the first time, what amphibious war truly looks like. The lesson is brutal but clear. Future invasions will require better intelligence on tides, more pre-landing bombardment, more armored amphibious support. But they will still require one thing above all else: boats that can reach the beach. On November 23rd, organized Japanese resistance collapses. The island is declared secure. Nearly the entire garrison has fought to the death. Of the roughly 4,500 defenders, only a handful survive. The cost for the Marines, over 3,000 casualties. As stretcher teams carry the wounded back toward waiting Higgins boats, the lagoon is quiet again. The reef that stopped steel-hulled craft has been crossed thousands of times by plywood hulls. From mockery to necessity, Tarawa has proven something no exercise ever could. But the world is watching now. And across the Atlantic, planners are preparing for an invasion that will dwarf Tarawa beyond imagination. When that day comes, it will not be coral reefs they face. It will be something even more formidable. June 6, 1944, 6:29 a.m. Omaha Beach, Normandy. The channel is gray and violent. Wind drives spray across the bows of hundreds of landing craft as they surge toward the French coast. Inside one Higgins boat, soldiers of Company E, 16th Infantry Regiment, 1st Infantry Division, the big red one, stand packed so tight they can feel each other breathing. The coxswain shouts over the engine, 30 seconds. Ahead the shoreline explodes. German 88s hammer the surf. MG-42 machine guns carve bright lines through the morning mist. Concrete bunkers stare down from bluffs like watchful eyes. The pre-invasion bombardment has churned the sand but left many defenses intact. It feels eerily familiar. 2.5 years earlier at Tarawa, Marines had learned what happens when you underestimate a defended beach. Now, those lessons are riding the channel tide. The Higgins boat slams into a sandbar. Drop it. The ramp crashes down. For an instant, the world becomes a funnel of noise and fire. The men in the front row vanish as bullets punch through them before their boots hit sand. The boat rocks as bodies fall forward. The coxswain reverses hard, dragging the craft away before it becomes a coffin. All along Omaha and Utah, Juneau and Gold, Sword and Point du Hoc, the same scene unfolds. Ramp down. Chaos. Ramp up. Back into the surf. Nearly 1,500 Higgins boats are participating in Operation Overlord. They carry infantry, engineers, medics. They shuttle back and forth relentlessly, bringing more men, more ammunition, evacuating the wounded. General Dwight D. Eisenhower had once toured Higgins' factories in New Orleans. He had seen the assembly lines, the welders, the rhythm of production that turned raw steel and plywood into the most essential vehicle of amphibious warfare. Now, as reports filter into his headquarters, he understands fully what Tarawa taught. Without those boats, the invasion fails before it begins. At Omaha, water obstacles and hidden sandbars trap heavier craft just as coral reefs once did in the Pacific. But the Higgins boats, shallow draft, maneuverable, push through where they can. They ground intentionally, drop their ramps, and reverse off before artillery can find them. Coxswains steer through floating wreckage. Some craft catch fire, others capsize in the surf, yet more keep coming, silhouettes against smoke. You can almost feel the ramp shudder under your boots as it falls. The sudden exposure, the split second where inside the boat feels safer than the beach, and then the choice disappears. Go forward or die where you stand. By midday, the beaches are a churn of craters and steel hedgehogs. Casualties are staggering. Units are fragmented, yet footholds form, fragile at first, then stubborn. And behind every foothold is a boat that made it possible. British Prime Minister Winston Churchill had once doubted whether large-scale amphibious assault against fortified Europe was even feasible. The memory of Gallipoli haunted him. But by 1944, the Allies possessed something Gallipoli never had: specialized landing craft designed for speed, repetition, and mass production. The Higgins boat is not glamorous. It is not heavily armed. It does not dominate headlines like battleships or bombers. But it does one thing perfectly. It delivers men directly onto hostile ground. By the end of D-Day, more than 150,000 Allied troops are ashore in Normandy. And thousands of them arrived in plywood boats born in the Louisiana bayou, boats once dismissed as flimsy experiments. Andrew Higgins will never see Omaha Beach firsthand, but his design is everywhere in the surf. From Tarawa's coral reef to Normandy's mine sands, the ramp has become the hinge on which the war turns. Yet even as Europe begins to fall back into Allied hands, the Pacific War is far from finished. Ahead lie islands far larger than Batio, beaches defended even more fiercely, kamikaze pilots, volcanic ash, jungle ridges. And once again, men will stand shoulder to shoulder inside those same 36 feet of plywood, waiting for the ramp to fall. February 19, 1945, 8:59 a.m. Iwo Jima. The sea is strangely calm. From the decks of transports offshore, Marines watch the volcanic island ahead, Mount Suribachi rising like a black fist from the Pacific. Naval guns have pounded it for days. Smoke drifts lazily over beaches of dark ash. Inside the Higgins boats, it feels like Tarawa all over again. Engines rumble, helmets knock together. A coxswain wipes sweat from his eyes and squints toward shore. The ramp cable rattles in its housing. Stand by. The boats surge forward in tight formation. The first ramps drop, and this time the sand swallows men whole. Iwo's beaches are not coral. They are soft volcanic ash that collapses under weight, turning every step into a struggle. Vehicles bog down. Tanks sink to their hulls. Marines stumble forward under machine gun fire erupting from hidden positions carved deep into rock. The bombardment has not broken the Japanese defenses. It never does. But the Higgins boats keep landing, wave after wave, bringing more men into the fight. They cannot solve the terrain. They cannot silence the bunkers. What they can do is ensure that the assault never runs dry of bodies, ammunition, and resolve. And that changes everything. By 1945, the LCVP is no longer controversial. It is standard, essential, indispensable. At Okinawa, April 1, 1945, more than 60,000 troops go ashore on the first day, many delivered in Higgins boats. Kamikaze attacks rage overhead. Artillery thunders inland. Yet the choreography of amphibious assault, refined in blood at Tarawa, moves with mechanical precision. Ramp down. Troops out. Reverse. Repeat. The Higgins boat becomes the heartbeat of the invasion fleet. Back in New Orleans, Andrew Higgins walks factory floors that now employ more than 30,000 workers. Women operate drill presses. Welders spark under cavernous ceilings. The rhythm of production never slows. More than 23,000 landing craft will bear his name by war's end. President Franklin D. Roosevelt once remarked that Higgins was the man who won the war for us. Eisenhower would echo that sentiment. Without the ability to land and sustain armies across oceans, strategy means nothing. Yet Higgins himself remains blunt, almost dismissive of praise. He had simply built a boat to solve a problem. Others had laughed. Naval traditionalists once insisted that plywood and shallow drafts were weaknesses, that steel and convention would prevail. But war is not won by tradition. It is won by adaptation. Tarawa was the proof. Normandy was the validation. Jima and Okinawa were the culmination. The Higgins boat did not fire the biggest guns. It did not command fleets. It did not carry generals' flags. It carried privates. It carried fear. It carried the weight of nations across reefs and sandbars and into machine gun fire. And every time the ramp fell, history moved forward a few violent steps. When the war finally ends in August 1945, the beaches fall silent. The ramps no longer slam into sand under gunfire. The plywood hulls that once braved coral and artillery rot quietly in surplus yards or are sold off for civilian use. But their legacy is permanent. From the Louisiana bayou to the blood-red sands of Tarawa, from the cliffs of Normandy to the volcanic ash of Iwo Jima, the so-called swamp boat reshaped modern warfare. They laughed at it until they needed it. And when the ramp dropped, the laughter stopped. And